People were curious, where would the defending HBCU national champions end in the SWAC preseason polls? Well, FAMU went from number 1 to number 2. It's a very slight drop off, but let's add even more context around the selection. Oh yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day, every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. And listen, I know that sports may not be sporting the way that you may want them to. It's on the horizon, though. In the meantime, though, go ahead and go to FanDuel.com and make sure that you get the daily boost or bonus that goes for all customers. That's right, everyone, every day, all summer long. We wrap up today's episode by taking a look at the HBCU players who were selected in the 2024 MLB draft. Prior to that, we'll take a look at the preseason SWAC offensive and defensive players of the year, Myles Crawley and Ckelby Givens. But we kick off today's episode in a very similar fashion that we kicked off yesterday's episode, because on yesterday we looked at the year of the Hornet, the number 1 overall team in the SWAC East. Now we go ahead and go to FAMU, the number 2 team in the SWAC East. And I think this was something that people were anticipating. People were anticipating what would happen with FAMU, not only in the actuality of playing the games, but then also where would they be predicted, because there's a lot that goes around who the Rattlers are today versus who they were a few months ago. I don't think we have to rehash that. But what I will say is, by looking at the preseason polls, I think that they come off as a still very respected team, because I've seen a couple of articles and things written about, were they snubbed? I don't think they were snubbed. To me, a snub is a crazy omission, a crazy ordering. I don't necessarily think that this is a crazy ordering. And not only do I not think it's that, I also believe that if you look at how they got here, because if you just say 1, 2, oh my God, how is FAMU not number 1? I already don't have that reaction. But then when I look at the points, because it is a point system of 24 votes between coaches and everybody involved, when you look at it, FAMU got 6 first place votes. There is still some confidence around this team. There is still respect around this team. And I think that's the important thing. When you start saying FAMU was snubbed, that's when you start saying they sleeping on us, they doubting. And, fans going to be fans. Players are going to need, bulletin board material, or they might desire it. So I'm not too mad at people who are saying that, but I'm giving my opinion on it. And to me, this was not a snub. To me, this was actually a sign of respect. When I went back to see, okay, how was Jackson State treated last year? Because I do think there's parallels. It's a very obvious one. You can make different arguments about the roster construction and everything, but there's a very obvious parallel between FAMU of 2024 and Jackson State of 2023. So I went back and I looked. FAMU got 2 first place votes last year. In 2023, everybody knew it was going to be FAMU's division. Everybody knew that they were going to win the SWAC East. It was a foregone conclusion. If it didn't happen, that would have been just the biggest disappointment of the season. This year isn't necessarily that. Alabama State got 11 first place votes. FAMU got 6 first place votes. But what you have to understand is that not everybody is going to think that FAMU is the number 1 squad. Not everybody's going to think that they're number 2. There is some overlap within the roster. And I know we sit here and I've talked about the continuity, I think probably 3 times this offseason in some capacity. And then I've mentioned it different times while speaking about FAMU, or excuse me, I've spoken about it 3 times as the main focus, and then a couple of other times sprinkled in some capacity. So I want to make it very clear. This has never been a FAMU is going to be bad. They're bringing in a bunch of transfer talent. They're bringing in a bunch of players who people think can impact immediately. And I still feel like that's reflected here. I don't think that the second place finish is a disrespectful thing to have. I believe that it's just as much about FAMU as it is Alabama State, right? Like, if we just look at it as this is FAMU, why dare you say they're number two? They're clearly number one. To me, a snub is a crazy omission. When you start saying the word snub, it's either a crazy omission, it's either a crazy order. It's things that just don't really make sense, and it's hard to wrap your head around. That's what a snub is. But it's like they always say, if you're going to take one off or you're going to put one on, you got to take one off. And if you're going to change the order and you're going to put FAMU at number one, that means you have to push down Alabama State. And that's where I get my point of, I think that FAMU's number two rating is just as much about the Rattlers as it is Alabama State. Because, yes, you have question marks at FAMU. And you know what? If Willie Simmons was here, I can guarantee you they would be number one. You know why? Because, some of those players that you did lose, some of those star players would have stayed. But then more importantly, even if you had this same roster makeup, I'm betting on Daniel Richardson to be better. I think we kind of feel like that's who's going to win it. But I'm also banking on Junior to be better. I'm banking on Willie Simmons to get me some serviceable offensive play and quarterback play. I'm banking on that. So that's a big question mark. If you have a question mark at your quarterback position, well, of course you're going to have a question mark as far as your team goes. But with Willie Simmons, now I'm looking at it different. I'm looking at this completely different because I just trust him. And what we have to understand is that trust comes into play when speaking about preseason projections. So that's the way I look at it. And also Alabama A&M, who was fourth place in the polls, they got 4 first place votes. So in those type things, in those type of or in those specific, I shouldn't say type, in those specific polls, you may have seen FAMU at a 4. Because FAMU does have some question marks, I think they're going to have, if I could project it, they probably had a high volatility between their highest ranking and their lowest ranking. I'll use this as a comparison because I love a good comparison, and I'll be on my way out the door. You look at the ESPN Plus rankings of positions, linebacker, running back, quarterback, whatever. The way they do it is they say Patrick Mahomes, number 1, right? His highest ranking was number 1. His lowest ranking was 3 or something like that, right? And that's kind of how I look at FAMU. Their highest ranking was 1, 6 times, but their lowest ranking may have been a 4, may have been a 5, because there's certain people who are just skeptical about how the new talent. There's certain people who may be skeptical about how Ckelby is going to be as a head coach at FAMU. These are valid questions, and some people aren't trying to project. They're playing it safe. You have conservative people, and you have people who are a little bit more aggressive. I think that because you have a blend of both of these approaches, you're going to have vastly different looks at what FAMU is going to be this year. I personally can't wait. I'm not really one to project. That's not what I do. I'm not a big prediction guy. I like to react, as far as I like to be reactive instead of proactive in my analysis of what a team will be. But I'm super excited to see what FAMU turns out to be, man. This is going to be very exciting. Right now, they have him at number 2 in a very competitive team. Let me know if you think this is a snub and you think it's disrespectful. Do you think it's disrespectful to say that FAMU is the number 2 team in the SWAC East instead of the number 1 team? I would love to hear your opinion on that. But now I'm going to get into the SWAC defensive and offensive players of the year. You have Givens and Crawley out of Grambling and Southern. So Louisiana is well represented when you're looking at the SWAC offensive and defensive player of the year. So let me go ahead and put on for the state as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And go to FanDuel.com to make sure you make every moment more. And I understand, sports ain't sporting like they used to. They're not sporting how you want them to. Because you know what? We here for the NBA and we're here for the NFL. A lot of us are. And that's okay. Because during the summer, we're going to make up for that kind of dry spell. We're going to look at the WNBA. We're going to look at the MLB. We're going to look at the Summer Olympics that are on the way. And we're going to make sure that you have a boost during all of these events all summer long. It doesn't matter if you're a new customer, if you're a returning customer. We're going to take care of everybody. So at FanDuel.com, you can go ahead and make every moment more with a daily bonus and boost, no matter who you are or how long you've been with FanDuel. So once again, go to FanDuel.com. That is FanDuel.com to make every moment more. Get down on the MLB, WNBA, Olympics. And if you can't wait, go ahead and get on some NFL futures. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On Sports Today. It's the first of its kind, 24/7, all day, every day live sports network on YouTube. Type in Locked On Sports Today, the entire thing, and go ahead and subscribe. Now, we've looked at FAMU. We looked at Alabama State on yesterday, so we've broken down number 1 and number 2 in the SWAC East. Tomorrow, we'll look at number 1 and number 2 together in the SWAC West, which is PV and Alcorn. All right. But now I want to get to some individuals because at SWAC Media Day, the preseason players of the year were revealed. And this year we saw Myles Crawley, the Grambling State quarterback. And then we also saw Ckelby Givens, the defensive end out of Southern. So before we get into these two players, let me give you something that I think would be kind of cool. What if we had preseason coaches of the year? This year, it's obviously Eddie Robinson. If Alabama State were to win their first SWAC title, it would be Eddie Robinson, right? But let's say a team like UAPB or Mississippi Valley State was predicted to go from worst in their division to number 2 in their division. Let's not say they were predicted to win it all because that makes it too obvious. It's easy to say coach of the year is just going to be the team you think is going to win it all. But if you have a dramatic jump like that, it very easily could be the team that made that jump from worst to second. Right, let's just say Kendrick Wade leads Mississippi Valley State to their best season in years. The best season that they've had in years. They don't win it all, but they're second place. That feels like a coach of the year type of season. I think it'd be kind of cool. Maybe asking the coaches to vote on the teams is where we have to draw the line, and you're getting too close to bias or too close to not being able to remain unbiased. Maybe that's the case. But if you ask me, that would be really interesting. Some years, not every year, but this year it would have been very boring. It would have been Eddie Robinson, and we've been like, oh, cool, you projected to be the coach of the year, and you also predicted to win the SWAC East. How do you feel? Anyway, let's get to these players because I'm always trying to come up with something new. It's almost like ain't nothing good enough for me, huh? But I'm always trying to come up with something new to try to improve or just give a different dynamic. Let's go with what the tried and true is, and that is at preseason media days, go ahead and give them the offensive and defensive players of the year. Let's kick it off with the offensive side of the ball, Crawley, because when I saw Crawley's name as the first team all SWAC player, I said, oh, yeah, he's going to win preseason offensive player of the year because this is a quarterback award. When you're looking at just the award in general, this is for the quarterback. I don't remember the last time that a running back won. It definitely hasn't been in the last 5 years. I don't know if it's been since I was in college. But when you're looking at the SWAC offensive player of the year, it's going to go to the player in the position that makes the offense go 9 times out of 10. I'm going to have this same conversation on defense, but I'm going to say this. Positional value does not change between subdivisions. It doesn't change between levels, professional, collegiate, going out. It does not change. Quarterback is always going to be the most valuable position. If you're in a team where the quarterback isn't your best player, that's one thing. If you're in a conference where a quarterback doesn't seem to drive the offense, it's probably because you have bad quarterback play. But it's still the most valuable position on the field. Like you still have offensive tackle, quarterback, linebacker, wide receiver, cornerback. These things don't change. These are your premier positions, right? You have 3 on offense, 2 on defense, those who can lead to the pass, and then also those who can stop the pass. That is what the premier positions are. And we can't sit here and lie and act like positional value doesn't play a part in who wins these certain awards. And offensive player of the year is no different. I think that Crawley and Body are the ones I thought were going to fight this out. I was stunned when I saw Jace Wilson. I was stunned when I saw Jace Wilson as the second team all SWAC player. It also didn't necessarily line up with TSU being so bad in the preseason polls, but whatever. Neither here nor there. But they were screwing up on that. How you don't have a 5th offensive lineman on your preseason all SWAC second team? Come on, y'all. I can't be riding for you like this. Anywho, back to Crawley and it being a quarterback award. I thought that Joseph said something very interesting during his main stage appearance. He said that he delivered this message to Crawley. We like where you at, but we don't love where you're at. that made everything I had heard over the offseason make a lot of sense. Everything I heard over the offseason was about Crawley competing. And I keep going back to this person. I don't know who it is, but somebody commented one time, are they supposed to just hand it to him or something of the sort? And I was just like, you're not supposed to just hand it to him. But every quarterback doesn't have to fight for his job when a new coach comes in. And I didn't think that Myles Crawley needed to. But now I'm at the point where it's not that they're disappointed in Crawley. It's the fact that they just wanted to push. It's not disappointment or a lack of belief. It's just iron sharpening iron. That's the best way to put it. When Crawley is in this quarterback competition, it's not because Joseph doesn't think he's a talented player. And he's like, man, I think I want a new quarterback. It's just iron sharpening iron. It was still his to lose. That every competition is not even. Some competitions, and I hope you're on the visual side, some competitions are even. Some start at a stagger. And when you're on the top of that stagger, it's yours to lose. Doesn't mean the other person can't win it, but it is yours to lose. You clearly started with a leg up. And I wasn't sure what situation the Grambling quarterback battle was in. It clearly was the latter. There was a stagger, and it seems like Myles Crawley did what he needed to do. But yeah, that explained a lot to me. I see a quarterback who threw for 2,300 yards. I see a quarterback who threw for 16 touchdowns. Crawley throwing for 2,316 touchdowns was good for second in the SWAC, only to Jeremy Musa in both categories. And Musa's gone. So now you're the leading returning. Is that how you would phrase it? Of all the quarterbacks who are returning, Myles Crawley has the most yards in last season. He has the most touchdowns in last season. He's stepping into a situation where I do feel like the West is very open. He has a new offense, so there are some question marks in that if he'll be able to replicate it. But hey, it's his third year learning a new system. So is this really anything new to him? Now you go to the defensive player of the year, and you have Ckelby Givens. And Givens out of Southern, him winning would put a stop to the off-ball linebacker run because that's what they do. In the SWAC, off-ball linebackers win this defensive player of the year, period. And unlike the offensive player of the year, the positional value does not match up because if you go to DPOY, offensive player of the year in these conferences is not equivalent to offensive player of the year in the NFL. It's equivalent to MVP. An MVP is a quarterback award. You start to see the offensive player of the year go to other positions, but MVP is the best parallel. Now, defensive player of the year in the SWAC in these conferences is a good parallel to defensive player of the year in the NFL. Because, and in that, it's a little bit strange because you don't see linebackers, off-ball linebackers winning it. Over the last decade, because the last off-ball linebacker to win it was Luke Kuechly in 2013. I looked it up on the way here. Over that, it's been a bunch of defensive end pass rushers, Aaron Donald, the greatest defensive player of the generation, in 1 year, Stephon Gilmore. And this, on the other hand, over the last 5-6 years, it's been off-ball linebackers outside of the spring and fall 21 season when you had Jordan Lewis and Isaiah Land who won it back-to-back. But this has been a off-ball linebacker heavy tackle award. We'll see how that works. When you look at Givens has 21 tackles for a loss last year. That was good for the most in the conference. Really dominant, by the way. You're looking at 7 sacks that he paired with that. So that's 28 disruptions. That's how I like to say it, disruptive stats. Then you have Malachi Bailey out of Alcorn, who's probably looking at this too. Like, hey, I had 9 sacks last year at 15.5 tackles for a loss. It doesn't match up as far as pure numbers. You still give that edge to Givens, but Bailey may be looking like, all right, I'm on the number 1 squad right now. Alcorn is expected to be number 1. Southern is expected to be 4. So you may see team success and then also just pure big time moments. When do you get these? They might lean towards sacks as opposed to tackles for a loss if these both are close. You know, it's a little bit of a gap between the tackles for a loss and the next guy because it's 21 to 15.5 versus 9 sacks to 7 sacks. So it's a little bit different. But overall, it all could be different. It could be a very tight race. I'll say that if we even see a defensive lineman win it. This is going to be very fun. I would say that Andrew Body needs to be in that conversation for Offensive Player of the Year as well. I'm not letting go. I told you yesterday I'm on that hype train. I'm going to stay here until it parks in the depot. I'm on the hype train all day long, all season long. Now, as we push forward, let's look at the 2 HBCU players, and I thought it was going to be more, but the 2 HBCU players who made it and were selected in the MLB draft. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3. And I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we've looked at the SWAC for 5 segments in a row if you go back to yesterday. But now we're here and we're gonna switch it up a little bit. We're gonna look at the MLB. We had 2 HBCU players who were selected in the MLB draft, and I was a little surprised. Be honest with you, I was a little surprised by this outcome. I thought that there would be 3 players drafted at least. I thought that Canyon Brown, Kyle Walker, and Cam Buford would all be drafted. Those were the 3 HBCU players who were invited to the MLB Combine. On top of that, on top of being wrong about the number of players, only one of those are the 2 that we're discussing today, and that's Canyon Brown. The other guy was Randy Flores out of Alabama State. Canyon Brown comes out of North Carolina A&T. Okay, maybe I'm naive, right? And I'm a baseball novice. I admit that. I'm still working towards it. But I was just thinking, and maybe I should have been better. Anyway, let me just tell you what I'm thinking. You made it to the combine. You obviously stood out to do it because you're a rarity there. You probably get drafted. Naive, oversimplified, all of those things you could say. I know I should be better, especially being a football guy who doesn't. I always compare football to other things. Like if it's a sport I'm not familiar with, I compare it to football in any kind of way. How can I connect this to my love, right? In football, if you go to the combine, you're not drafted. But granted, it's more people in the, I swear I looked it up. But everything that I swore about here, I had to go look up. There's more players in the combine, NFL combine, than get drafted. So, of course, everybody who's there is not going to be drafted. It's like double the amount of players in the MLB combine that get drafted. It's a million rounds in this draft. Everybody and their mama I got drafted. I was drafted by the Texas Rangers in the 19th round. You just didn't see it because you was too busy looking for the mouth of the South. You should have been looking for Darian Gray. Don't go check, but I promise you'll see me if you did. But yeah, this is it's a different dynamic, but at the same time, maybe I was just being naive. That's on me. I got to take that. But yeah, so you had Randy Flores out of Alabama State, and you had Canyon Brown out of North Carolina A&T. Then I went back to look, because I want to make sure I went back to look at last year's to see if the players who were in the MLB combine from HBCUs last year got drafted. Only one did, Xavier Meacham. So, okay, it's not necessarily a guarantee. And I know there's no such thing as a guarantee, but there's foregone conclusions. And I thought that was a foregone conclusion. Won't make that mistake again. Scout's honor. Anyway, I'm just having fun at this point, y'all. I don't know if you can tell, but at this point, I'm just enjoying myself. But let's get into it. Canyon Brown and Randy Flores. Brown is the North Carolina A&T catcher. It's the second year in a row that the Aggies have sent somebody to the MLB Combine. It's the second year in a row that they got a player drafted. Last year was Xavier Meacham, the one who I told you did get drafted. He was their pitcher. So there was a little bit of a connection there. At the time, Meacham was the highest drafted Aggie since 1975. He was drafted in the 10th round. But now you look at Brown, he's came in and he was drafted in the 9th round. So now he's broken that record of the highest ranked or highest drafted player in so long. And then you look at Randy Flores, who, if I'm not mistaken, is the highest drafted HBCU player in a long time. Let me make sure I have that correct. But Flores is a player who, man, I raved about coming out of the MLB Combine, or excuse me, coming out of the HBCU Classic. That was me personally. Yeah, so he was the first person, and he was drafted in the 8th round by the Angels. So coming out of the HBCU Swingman Classic, there was 3 players who stood out, and he was the one that was at the top of the list. I don't know if I brought him up originally. I don't know if he was the first person I mentioned, but of everybody out there, he was the one who caught my eye the most as far as hitting. I thought he was extremely accurate. I thought he was extremely efficient, when he was at bat. And not only that, he always stole a base or 2 afterwards. Yeah, so there we go. This is the first Alabama State player drafted since the Atlanta Braves drafted Ray Hernandez. I can't find it right now, but I thought I saw that he was the highest drafted player in the last 15 some odd years. Anyway, maybe I didn't catch that. Doesn't matter. The point is, Randy Flores was the highest HBCU drafted player this year. This season, he was number one, and I just thought he was really good. I thought he had a good moment in the field when he had a leaping catch. He's a shortstop, I believe. He had the leaping catch. You're looking at a 2-time first team All SWAC player. You're looking at a player who was very efficient at bat. I went through. If you go to Monday's episode, because I don't feel like going over it again, but on Monday's episode, he drove 3 pitches in between first and second and third, all of which looked different coming off the bat. It was a real beautiful display. So you have Canyon Brown, who's the second North Carolina A&T player selected in as many years. And you have Randy Flores, who is the first Alabama State player drafted in the last 6 years, so since 2018. On tomorrow's episode, we'll take a look at the Wild Wild West. I'm not sure if it's so much wild and dangerous and more so middle of the pack teams who aren't necessarily competing to be conference elites. Over the last couple of years, that's what it's felt like. We're going to look at Alcorn and Prairie View A&M and how the West is being perceived on Thursday's episode. Or excuse me, Friday's episode. Woo, the week's almost over, y'all. I'm still getting acclimated to doing 5 days a week. I'm back in the gym with it. Anyway, in the meantime, in between time, make sure you get your sets and drink your water. Take care. Stay blessed. Peace.